Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. In this video, I'm going to be talking about propositions 141 through 145 in Proclus's Elements of Theology. As I've been doing throughout this series, I'm using the E.R. Dodds translation, and so for those of you who don't have the paper version, there is a link in the description box for a PDF version. And also, this is a series, and so for those of you who would like to see some of the past videos, I'm going to link the playlist here. In this set of propositions, Proclus is once again returning his attention to the providence of the gods. Proposition 141 reads, "There is one divine providence which transcends its objects, and one which is coordinate with them." So here again, Proclus is looking at the gods being both transcendent and immanent. I did touch on this a little bit in my last video with Proposition 140. The two propositions that most centrally deal with this issue, though, are 98 and 122. So Proposition 98 is the one that reads, "Every cause which is separate from its effects exists at once everywhere and nowhere." And in the body of the explanation, he talks about the transcendent purity of these causes, and that's also what is meant by the word separate. And he also talks about the immanence in their effects. Now, the other proposition that we want to keep in mind is Proposition 122. And this one states that all that is divine both exercises providence towards secondary existences, and it also transcends the beings for which it provides. Its providence involves no remission of its pure and unitary transcendence. Neither does its separate unity annul its providence. And he opens the explanation by saying that without declension from the unity which is their substance, the gods have filled all things with their power. So there is no contradiction in the gods being both transcendent and immanent. Their transcendency is actually what allows the gods to be present equally to all participants. Okay, with this background in mind, I think this Proposition 141 is really quite manageable. It is a short one, so I'm going to read through the whole thing and then I'm going to talk about it. Okay, so again, the proposition is that there is one divine providence which transcends its objects and one which is coordinate with them. For some divine principles, in virtue of their substance and the especial character of their station, are completely exalted in their simplicity above the beings which they irradiate. And that was Proposition 122. While others, belonging to the same cosmic order as their objects, exercise providence towards the inferior members of their own series, imitating in their degree the providential activity of the transcendent gods, and desiring to fulfill secondary existences with such good things as they can. And so the first question that pops for you is probably, what are these others? So I want to remind you of Proposition 139. And this one states that the sequence of principles which participate the divine Henads extends from being to the bodily nature, since being is the first, and body, inasmuch as we speak of heavenly or divine bodies, is the last participant. And there's also one part here that I highlighted, that deity exists on the corporeal, the psychical or the soul level, and the intellective level, evidently by participation in each case, since deity in the primary sense is proper to the Henads. So Proposition 139 introduced us to the notion of intellectual gods, the supermundane gods, or the gods of the soul level, and the mundane gods, the gods of the corporeal level. These are what Proclus is referencing in Proposition 141. Notice that a distinction is made here between those that exist by participation and the deity in the primary sense. And so we come back here to Proposition 141 and we see that these others would be the heads of each of the realms of reality, belonging to the same cosmic order as their objects, intellect, soul, and so on. And he goes on to say that they exercise providence towards the inferior members of their own series, imitating in their degree the providential activity of the transcendent gods, the Henads in the primary sense, and desiring to fulfill secondary existences with such good things as they can. And so now this becomes much more understandable. The gods at the head of each realm are existences that are gods by participation. And by way of that participation, they are able to further carry the divine providence of the transcendent Henads throughout all the realms. Remember, the highest expression of the gods is beyond all existence, metaphysically prior to even being itself. So the gods at the head of each realm, then, you might say, are the means of the delivery and immanence of providence. Proposition 142. This one is probably among the most famous and the most widely cited of all the propositions. This one reads, "The gods are present alike to all things. Not all things, however, are present alike to the gods. But each order has a share in their presence proportioned to its station and capacity. Some things receiving them as unities, and others as manifolds, some perpetually and others for a time, some incorporeally and others through the body." This one is building on the imagery that was laid out in Propositions 122 and 140, which I touched on in my last video. I call this one, Proposition 142, the law of providence. We can each participate in providence to the degree that we are able to. Now, what we're going to see here is that the difference in the degree of participation from one entity to another is due not to the gods, but to the fitness of the participants. Okay, here's how Proclus starts his explanation. For the differences in the participation of the same principles must be due to a difference either in the participant or in that which is participated. But whatever is divine keeps the same station forever, and is free from all relation to the lower and all admixture with it. Proposition 98 is the one that says that the gods are everywhere, or causes are everywhere and nowhere. So this sets up the situation. The difference is due either to the participant or to the participated. Now we've already seen that it cannot be the participated, which is the gods. That's been well established by now. And so it follows, therefore, by exclusion, that the variation can be due only to the participants. In them must lie the lack of uniformity, and it is they that are present to the gods diversely at different times, and diversely one from another. Notice that the same participant can be present differently at different times. And this is quite consistent actually with our own experiences. Those of you who've been doing this for a while have undoubtedly noticed that there are periods in which you're more focused. Perhaps you're meditating regularly and you feel providence in your life more fully. It can show up in various forms. It's in our dreams or by way of insights. Synchronicities increase as well. But during other periods, though, when we fall out of that routine, we may find ourselves being distracted by external factors or even by daydreams. And this is nothing to beat ourselves up over. We're not robots after all. We're not machines that run at the same speed every day. We have our sharp days and our dull days. And so there are days when we are present to the gods and other days when we are less so. Thus, while the gods are present alike to all things, not all things are present alike to them. Each order is present in the degree of its capacity and enjoys them in the degree of its presence, which is the measure of its participation. So that gives us a nice, succinct definition of the law of providence. Now, perhaps at this point you're throwing up your hands and thinking, great, so it's my own fault? Proclus is answering, yep, it sure is. But a more positive spin on this is to see that the power is in your hands. Whatever human limitations you imagine having are just that, they're images. Where do we draw the line between what is accessible to us and what is beyond us? To even draw such a line is a theory, but that's fine because theories can be tested. And I encourage everyone watching this video to challenge this theory. If you do so sincerely, you will find that line getting pushed up farther and farther. I like Proposition 143. It's a nice complement to the law of providence. So this one reads, all inferior principles retreat before the presence of the gods, and provided the participant be fit for the reception, whatever is alien makes way for the divine light, and all things are continuously illuminated by the gods. Proclus introduced a new phrase here. Whatever is alien. I'm going to hold off on saying any more until after I go through the explanation, but this phrase is key. So Proclus starts off his explanation with, for the divine principles are always more comprehensive and more potent than those which proceed from them. And this is an idea from Proposition 57. And this one states that every cause both operates prior to its consequent and it gives rise to a greater number of posterior terms. And in the explanation he said, if then the cause is more powerful than its consequent, it is productive of a greater number of effects. So causes are more powerful, they produce more, which means they're more comprehensive. Okay, so the divine principles are more comprehensive and more potent. And so the second half of the sentence is that it is the unfitness of the participants which occasions the failure of the divine light, obscuring by its weakness even that radiance. And that's a nice summary of Proposition 142. But now notice what's being introduced in the next sentence. When the light is obscured, another principle appears to assume dominion. Yet it is not by its own potency, but through the impotence of the participant, that it has the appearance of revolting against the divine form of illumination. What is Proclus referring to here? We have to ask ourselves, what is it that obscures the light? This such talk is what I suspect the origin of the belief in other spiritual systems for a demonic force fighting against God in God's light. However, this such idea of a demonic force is not part of the Platonic system. Proclus is telling us that it is only an appearance. It is not real. It does not have its own potency. It is just a false belief that we accepted, and so we felt weakened by it. False beliefs function as blocks, and so Proposition 143 here follows naturally from Proposition 142, and I think it should be seen as pointing to the way in which we can participate more fully. Namely, we need to address our false beliefs. I'm going to link a video at the end of this one addressing false beliefs. And also, let me know in the comments if you want more videos dealing with this aspect of the philosophic life. Proposition 144. The procession of all things existent and all cosmic orders of existence extends as far as do the orders of gods. So Proclus has already established that there is a parallel unfolding of gods and existence. Now he's matching up not only a particular Henad with a particular existent, but the orders as well. So the gods, as we saw back in Proposition 139, extend as far as to the corporeal realm, and that corporeal realm is the furthest extent of the orders of existence also. For in producing themselves, the gods produced the existence, and without the gods nothing could come into being and attain to measure and order, since it is by the gods' power that all things reach completeness, and it is from the gods that they receive order and measure. So we can break this sentence down into pieces. First, Proclus opens here by stating that the Henads produce the real existence. And we saw that back in Proposition 137. And this proposition states that every Henad is cooperative with the One in producing the real existent which participates it. Next, we see that it is by the gods' power that all things reach completeness, and it's from the gods that they receive order and measure. Receiving measure from the gods was established back in Proposition 117, and so that's a good one to take a look at. And Proposition 117 states very plainly and clearly that every god is a measure of things existent. If every god has the character of unity, then he defines and measures all the manifolds of existent things. And so by giving measure to things existent, order is also determined, since measure establishes how close an existent is to the One. And order being determined by the gods can be seen in other propositions as well, such as Proposition 136. And for this one, I'm just going to focus on the yellow highlighting where it states that the order of the real existence reflects its prior and it corresponds in its sequence with the order of the Henads. Okay, so it's from the Henads that they get their order. And thus, he goes on, even the last kinds in the realm of existence are consequent upon the gods, who regulate even these, who bestow even on these life, informative power, and completeness of being, who convert even these upon their good. And so also are the intermediate and the primal kinds, or in some translations, generations. So he's saying it follows that this reliance that the existents have on the gods would extend even to the furthest reaches of the existence. And so the conclusion, all things are bound up in the gods and deeply rooted in them, and through this cause they are preserved in being. If anything fall away from the gods and become utterly isolated from them, it retreats into non-being and is obliterated, since it is wholly bereft of the principles which maintained its unity. So I think it's been well established by now that unity is the condition for all existence. As a quick refresher on this idea, here's Proposition 13. Every good tends to unify what participates it, and all unification is a good, and the good is identical with the One. And in the explanation, he tells us that it belongs to unity to bring and keep each thing together. And by its presence, it makes each thing complete. And so there's also the idea of completion that we saw in Proposition 144. Now the one is the condition for all existence, and the henads are the participable onenesses that maintain that unity. I want to remind you now of Proposition 123. This one reads, all that is divine is itself ineffable and unknowable by any secondary being because of its supra-existential unity. But it may be apprehended and known from the existence which participate it. Wherefore only the first principle is completely unknowable as being unparticipated. So the one, as first principle, is the condition for existence, but it transcends all that exists. It communicates its unity by way of the gods. Hence Proclus's last statement here. If anything fall away from the gods and become utterly isolated from them, it retreats into non-being and is obliterated, since it is wholly bereft of the principles which maintained its unity. Proposition 145 gives us something new. It's adding something very important. With this proposition, we are finally going to get some sense of some of the distinctive characters, some of the providential powers of the divine orders. So this proposition reads, the distinctive character of any divine order travels through all the derivative existence, and it bestows itself upon all the inferior kinds again, or generations. And this basic idea of a God's characteristic passing through all the real existence follows naturally from the pairing of gods and existences. We've seen a number of propositions that point to this conclusion. Proposition 140, for example. All the powers of the gods, taking their origin above and proceeding through the appropriate intermediaries, descend even to the last existence and to the terrestrial regions. And now we're seeing the significance of this metaphysical structure. He says, for if the procession of existence extends as far as do the orders of gods, then the distinctive character of the divine powers radiating downwards is found in every kind, since each thing obtains from its own immediate cause the distinctive character in virtue of which that cause received its being. And now I want to focus on the next sentence where Proclus gives us some examples. I intend that if, for example, there be a purifying deity, then purgation is to be found not only in souls, but also in animals, in vegetables, and in minerals. So also, if there be a protective deity, and the same if there be one charged with the conversion, or the perfection, or the vitalizing of things existent. So the providential powers of the gods unfold through all the realms. They extend not only to the rational souls, but also to animals, vegetables, and even minerals. But also worth noting here through these examples, Proclus is telling us what powers the gods communicate to existences. And so Proclus just gave us 5 different powers of the gods: purifying, protecting, or guarding as it's called elsewhere, converting, perfecting, which is actually closely connected to the idea of converting, or reversion in other places, and vitalizing. sometimes there is a bit of confusion because of different translations. Here, Dodds is using conversion, other translators use reversion. I tend to think reversion is better just because conversion has a different meaning in Christianity and it can be confusing to some people. So reversion is really what he means here. And protective is sometimes called guarding. Also later when we get to Proposition 152, Proclus is going to add generating to the list. So we want to keep an eye out for these different characteristics or powers as we go forward. For now, though, let's stay with his example of the purifying power, because Proclus is going to flesh this one out some more. And Proclus explains, the mineral participates the purifying power only as bodies can. The vegetable in a clearer manner also, that is, vitally. The animal possesses this form in an additional mode, that of appetition. A rational soul, rationally, an intelligence, intellectually or intuitively. The gods, supra-existentially, and after the mode of unity. And the entire series possesses the same power as the result of a single divine cause. So each existent participates to the degree that is proper to its station in the series, but all do participate of this purifying power. And the same account applies to the other characters or powers. So we can write a similar explanation of the vitalizing power or the perfecting power and so on. For all things are dependent from the gods, some being irradiated by one god, some by another, and the series extend downwards to the last orders of beings. Now some are linked with the gods immediately, but others through a varying number of intermediate terms, which is a nice summary, by the way, of Proposition 128. But all things are full of gods, and from the gods each derives its natural attribute. So Proclus is leaving us here with a beautiful image, and it is one, by the way, that makes a really nice meditation. And I'll end it there for today. Proclus will go on in the next set of propositions to focus more on the hierarchical structure of the divine orders. So I do hope that you'll join me for that video, and please give this one a like if you found it helpful. Thank you very much.